Well, we're back for week 2 of making a band movies, and we have a special guest. But before we introduce him, Zack is here with a friend. How are you doing, Zack?
I thought that was a special guest. My little owl. I named him Hootie because I thought of his name 1 second ago, and that's all I could come up with.
Zack has zero creativity when it comes to owl naming.
And zero friends, and that's why I have to have this owl.
It's got really down. But we do have a man who has definitely propositioned a woman just as classy as Glenn Hanser does in the film once. It's Jake Maringoni.
Is that a compliment or an insult? What is that?
I mean, it's just, hey man, sometimes you want to be straightforward. He was straightforward.
Yeah.
Striking as a straightforward gentleman.
Like this, you can say the night.
Absolutely awesome.
Happy to be here. This is fun. I love you guys. You guys are crazy.
That's the nicest thing I heard all day.
I'm very happy that I get to be on. Even if Zack has more respect for the owl than he does for me.
I mean, what else is new? But let us get started with our favorite little intro. Zack, what's the last movie you logged on Letterboxd?
Oh shit. It's Tampopo. I don't feel like I should say it like that, but Tampopo is 1985, like every other movie I have talked about as the last thing I saw for the past 2 months. Recommended by former guest and guest never again, Paul Yama. And it was like a fucking delight. So most of this movie, the primary story or like the A plot is two drivers try to help this woman make her ramen shop the best it can possibly be, and it's just about them like forming a team to make this best ramen, and a lot of just the joy and delight of making food as much as like eating food as well, which watching people be so passionate about something is always my jam and enjoyment. But then every 20 minutes is like a couple skits that have nothing to do with the plot and have no characters within it. It's just like straight up skit compilations of funny ideas they had about people interacting with food, and some of them were like some of the best jokes I've like witnessed all year. And it's not as weird as it sounds. It kind of comes out of nowhere, but it makes it work. It's delightful. It's almost just like if you watch like an old cartoon like Rocky and Bullwinkle, after every 10 minutes there's just like a short to play in between it, and it kind of plays like that. But I think it adds to the general joy of the movie. And I watched Fletch right before I watched Tim Popo, and I laughed in the first 5 minutes of Tim Popo so much more than I laughed at anything about Fletch, because there's a guy apologizing to pork, and that's great.
All right. Well, I will agree.
Watch it.
Fletch, not that funny.
It's on HBO. It's on HBO Max.
Jake, have you seen Tampopo?
I'll be honest, didn't even know this was a film that existed until Zack just started the title of the movie. It sounds interesting. It sounds weird. I think that's kind of like a movie that I'd like. We'll see how it goes. If I could even find it.
There is, though, no matter how like joyful everything is, there's like a 1 minute one of the skits does the grossest thing I've ever saw done with an egg, and if I was acting in that, they would have to pay me $5 million.
More importantly, Jake, what do you think of the film Fletch? Do you think that's funny?
I have not seen Fletch. I got asked a question about that in a trivia match, and I didn't know it, so shame on me. I guess.
I know.
Not good.
Chevy Chase comedy from the 80s. So
if you like 90 minutes of Chevy Chase lying about his name, then you'll be into it. That's all it has to offer.
Yeah, it's not brilliant. Jake, what's the last movie you watched on Letterboxd?
So I mean, I was going to talk about Mank. That's already been out before this. When this episode gets released, so I don't feel special enough to talk about Mank. I'm just going to talk about Venom. I'm sorry, guys. I just context. I mean, I love. Everybody knows in this community. Venom is like that. Is my ultimate like guilty pleasure of the 2010s. I will tell you guys that it should be in my top 100 because I really like. I find that movie highly entertaining. But I mean, it was a Saturday night. I had the weekend off. I thought, I might as well have a couple of drinks and enjoy this comedic masterpiece. It's just one of those movies that I just get so much entertainment from. Even it's like the unintentional comedic enjoyment of Tom Hardy's performance as Eddie Brock. It's like he doesn't know what he's doing with the character. Like when he jumps into the lobster tank, it's like, am I supposed to be taking this serious? There's some weird, just comedic moments, and I just think it's just a really fascinating, just Sony film. Like they're really trying to kickstart their the Spider-Man cinematic universe. I'm legit hyped for Venom 2. Andy Serkis directing that is just like WTF. But yeah, it's a really just weird blockbuster that made like a shit ton of money.
Yeah, I mean, if you Jake's letterbox log book for the film Venom is sort of one of the great artifacts of American history because the first time he watched it, I'm pretty sure he gave it like 1.5 stars, and it
goes
literally
back and forth.
He rewatched it like 4 times, calling it garbage. And then at some point, it just jumps to 5 stars, and it's been 5 stars ever since.
I just stopped lying to myself. Like, no, this isn't a bad movie. This is a masterpiece of cinema. This is transcendent. And
we applaud this.
I do feel like this is a lovely example of the filmmakers just like vibing with how the audience is dealing with it. Like, I don't think it's the intention they had behind the film to make it this kind of laughable, campy movie. But once they, I feel like, saw the audience taking it that way, they're like, sure, that's what we are. And that's what we're going to keep doing. I feel like they're just going with the flow.
I wish that they made it like R-rated. Like, there's just, you see Venom like bite people's heads off, and you see like nothing. There's very little violence that feels like earned, and that's like one of the big detriments of the movie. But I don't give a fuck about any flaws. If I'm giving it 5 stars and you can tell I'm like incredibly intoxicated, then like you should not take my opinion on Venom seriously.
If it's not R-rated though, now Theo will get to see Venom at a younger age, and that's
Great.
Should make you happy.
Yeah.
He's perfect. They can watch it.
We're watching it tomorrow.
I do remember watching this and being like, I never could tell if Riz Ahmed was trying to be funny or trying to be scary and failing at being scary. It is a fascinating movie because it is one of the few. There are not a lot of movies that exist where you can watch it and be like, I legitimately don't know what the director was going for, and you truly get to have your own interpretation. Is Riz Ahmed failing at being a villain, or is Riz Ahmed doing some kind of brilliant comedic twist on a villain? Like, you truly get to make that choice when you watch this. Also,
that direction. Like River Flash just had no idea. Like, you are the villain. That's your character. Like, that's it. Like, he gets fucking nothing to do unless
the note card.
Right.
Can you now talk about how Eminem was snubbed of his Oscar win for Venom?
I don't. It's one of the best songs of the 2010s, right? It should have. It's a humongous snub to get Rachel. I don't know how they approach Eminem. Like, he's not in his peak anymore. He's not a
no.
People like Eminem. He's cool. Like, it's even still like. And then he had the Kamikaze album and other shit. And I'm not really like into the whole that area of music, but why Eminem of like your rappers and shit like of the 2010s? Like, you think they would be
really
like,
relates to the
first one to say yes? Or it's just Eminem's cool. It feels like a film that would have been like perfect if it came out in like the early 2000s with like the Eminem song and everything. It's just 20 years too late. So.
Well, I would not doubt that Eminem has like a big Venom tattoo on his chest. I can see him just be like really into it. And, like, I need to do a song. I feel so. One of my favorite things ever is that Sufjan Stevens, my favorite musician, submitted a song about Tanya Harding to I, Tanya to be in the movie, and they rejected it, and they released it on its own. And it's a great song, but they're like all 80s hair bands. So do you think Eminem just like wasn't asked to do it? He just submitted his song to the Venom people. Really it's like, I really need to be in this movie.
It does really feel like if this movie was released in 2002, it would have been received much better as the beginning swing of the comic book movies, rather than after basically 10 years of dominance in the marketplace. I think that movie is given a lot more ability to like a lot more credit and a lot more like people are willing to interpret it and think about it.
It reminds me of Spawn, but if it came out in the 2010s, like that type of movie, that schlocky kind of anti-hero with these crazy visual effects and stuff that they couldn't do at the time, but it's now just it came out in the 2010s with the appropriate like technical shit that they can do with it. But it's a weird film with like a weird like the music. It's done by Ludwig Göransson, who won an Oscar that year for Black Panther, like who's collaborated with Childish Gambino. And then you also have the cinematographer, which is Matthew Libatique, like the guy that shot Requiem for a Dream and Black Swan and Mother, like these Darren Aronofsky films, shot Venom. And it doesn't look anything like what you would think for a Matthew Libatique film. It's like, oh man, I wish that it just went a little weirder. So let's fingers crossed on Venom 2.
Yeah, don't worry. Venom 2 available on Apple TV Plus next Easter. That's streaming.
Yeah.
That is a good question. What streaming service does Sony have a contract with? I don't know.
Yeah, I made that up.
I don't know if it's Apple TV. Maybe Apple. I heard Apple TV was trying to get James Bond, which is like the most ridiculous bid ever.
Yeah.
Because like Bond will never sell to a streaming service.
Should have just paid it all. They should pay it all. They need to get subscribers, and I actually really like Apple TV is a horrible design, but they're getting a lot of movies that I'm pretty pumped for. They have a lot of filmmakers working for them that I'm excited about. And so I've watched quite a bit. There's Sofia Coppola, Werner Herzog, Tom Moore, which is I'm the only person who would say Tom Moore's name with those other two people. He's the Irish animator that does Secret of Kells and Song of the Sea. But his movie's gonna be on there, and they're all like they're getting good shit.
Absolutely. So the last movie I watched on Letterboxd is a movie that I believe almost caused an international incident between countries when it was released, and is one of the most benign and, dare I say, boring films released by these actors. And it's The Interview with Seth Rogen and James Franco, where they go to interview Kim Jong-un. And for two guys who have been in a lot of funny movies and have done a lot of kind of crazy stuff that is, pushing boundaries in those movies, jokes that maybe now could be looked back on like maybe that doesn't hold up as well, that doesn't age great. This movie is really just not much. Like, what's the biggest insult this lobs at Kim Jong-un? He likes Katy Perry. Like it doesn't really even take a shot at Kim Jong-un. Like, it sort of makes fun of all the myths about him about, oh, he's like superhuman and he doesn't go to the bathroom and like all this ridiculous stuff. But this movie is just, first off, it's not very funny. It's really kind of boring. And for a movie that like they didn't put in theaters because they were worried about the consequences, it's kind of a nothing to look back at.
Yeah.
I'm trying to. Please, Zach. I don't want to take over.
Well, I saw your face, and I thought you were going to be like, "I fucking love the interviews." I immediately went to Letterboxd, and there's no record of you seeing it at all.
Yeah,
but okay, I have no memory of the movie because it was like years ago.
Like 5 years ago.
Yeah, so more than a week ago. I don't remember it. And I do remember that. The more interesting part of everything behind the scenes, the issues with that. I think was it part of the Sony leaks as well.
Yes.
When there's something that plays out, there's so much behind the scenes interest that the movie could never live up to everything surrounding it.
I do find. So I remember like the day when it was like announced that the whole threat with North Korea and shit with Sony and him having to pull it from theaters. I remember being like kind of interested in the movie. Like it's an interesting kind of premise. And I remember just realizing, holy shit, they're gonna just take this movie down just because they got like a weird threat from North Korea. It's crazy that that's almost like unprecedented as far as like film go. And then I don't even remember at the time, but did they just release it on Netflix back in 2014? Or what was like?
I think they did. Yeah, that was one of the early. It was preemptive to COVID. It dropped movies that was supposed to be in theaters.
True, yeah. So that's like one of the first films. That's like
The Interview and Cloverfield Paradox or the President Feathers.
Yeah, they basically just put it on VOD. Yeah,
it's easy enough.
Yeah. It's just interesting though that movies like this, and I think it made me think of The Hunt from this past year. The weird hunting deploy. These movies have these big controversies about them, and then they come out, and people instantly forget them because the movies are just not that great. Any movie that is overwhelmed by this weird controversy and gets pushed because of it, inevitably the movie doesn't live up to that. Like The Interview The Interview could have been great and never would have lived up to it. But the fact that it is so meh after all this like craziness is just like the movie basically just disappeared from history, which is kind of interesting because you have two quite major stars in that movie.
Well, you know what?
Have like this have this like spark controversy and like this impact on culture, and then it gets changed and shifted, and then when it finally gets released, it's just some like just bland movie that's not special in any way, and the only reason why it is special is the controversy. So it's almost as if is this a product that was created to spark controversy just for it to stand out from other films, or what was the exact intention behind making the movie in the first place. So I mean, it's like with The Hunt, and I'm sure there's like a couple other examples that I can't think of from the top of my head, but definitely those two films.
I don't think they do it to stir controversy, but they hope the controversy will stir people to watch their movies. But what they are underestimating is how much more people like just talking shit rather than actually watching movies. America's true pastime is being assholes about things they haven't seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think they definitely made the interview hoping to spark controversy, but I think you're right. At the end of the day, probably more people were like, "Oh yeah, did you see that movie that they pretended to interview Kim Jong-un?" In the same way that stuff happened with The Hunt or even Cuties this past year, were like, let's be real, 90 million people talked shit about that movie. 5,000 people saw that movie.
Hey, you know who saw it? Not me, but my mom, Lisa Ford. She loved it.
That's the thing. That's the hilarious thing with that movie. So many people talked crap about it. We're like, I'm going to cancel Netflix. And then most of the people who actually watched the movie were like, everyone's an idiot. You guys got fooled by controversy and just people stirring up shit.
It was like an Andy Kaufman prank.
Yeah,
I'm gonna fuck with society by making this film that make people think is bad and Me Too or something, and then it's just a charming little movie. But I haven't seen it. Will I see it? Probably not.
I will. I'll let you know. I'll talk about it on our next episode for when they post you
Next episode, Cuties. Do they make a band in that movie? Is there a band getting together?
I don't think so.
No, they're a dance group. So when we do Dance Month, whenever official National Dance Month is, and Lucas will let us do it.
I'm figuring out what National Dance
Month. Lucas almost got kicked off the show because he probably messaged me about doing a month on breast implants.
I just happened to
National Breast Implant Month.
I happened to look up a list of like what months it was, and it happened that November was National Breast Plant Awareness Month. And as a joke,
breast plant, which sounds like mold.
Breast implant. Breast implant. This has gotten stupider than we wanted to. Thank you, Seth Rogen.
All right, I think this conversation is better than the interview.
It is 100%. Let's continue on to our discussion of the film we actually showed up to talk about, which is not the interview.
There's a lot of breast plants in it, though.
Once, Zack Ford, will you hit us with the Zack Ford plot summary for a movie?
I'm really glad you reminded me to do this because the episode we taped 5 weeks ago, The Wrong Man, you forgot to do this. I just let it go.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
I started talking, yeah. Although I will say this movie is perfect for you because there are no character modes, so you cannot screw them up.
There's no plot. I think they're called the guy and girl.
They're called guy and girl.
Yeah. Most of the characters in the credits, it's like their description of like who they are. Like,
it's like guy and girl, ex-girlfriend, dad. Like it's kind of amazing.
Guy's dad.
They're heroin addict. First character we see heroin addict. Or second character we see heroin addict. Great guy. My best friend. Okay. So Glenn Hansard, he plays Guy. Glenn Hansard, hero of the universe. It's a great singer. Glenn Hansard is basically playing himself. Actually, he's playing himself at the end of The Commitments. We've talked about this. The Commitments ends with Glenn Hansard's character, playing on the streets, trying to get music, and it starts right back off where that let off of him playing in the streets of Dublin. He has aspirations to be a songwriter and stuff, and he only plays his original songs at night because he has to play the covers that help him get those dollars during the day. In another way, he gets his dollars. He works at his dad's vacuum cleaner shop. He meets up with a woman that just like sells random shits, whatever she's told to sell each day: magazines, roses, lost children. And so
does not sell lost children, just so we're clear.
Yeah, I don't know that. Okay. Anyways, wow. She's like into his music or into the idea, and she's a musician herself. So she keeps striking up a conversation and kind of forces him to give her attention by saying she needs her vacuum cleaner fixed. They walk with the vacuum cleaner for like 40 minutes. Vacuum cleaner, also my best friend. It was the best man at my wedding. And they never really spawned a romance. It's kind of budding, but it's more about they develop a creative romance because they really help spark the songwriting in each other. They found out, as they play piano store, how they're able to melt together creatively so quickly and really have chemistry musically. And then they record an album together, or like at least like an EP, a few songs in one day at a studio, all leading them to discover where they want their life to go, which is to try harder to get through their pain and their heartaches. And Glenn Hansard goes to England, to London, to find his ex-girlfriend that he was kind of stuck up with. Not stuck, he was broken up about the whole movie. Decides to go fight for her and also try to find a way to get his music career working in London by using the pieces recorded in Arcadia Globa. Gets her husband to come down to Ireland to try and get her family to go together. Why did she have a husband? Does she have a kid? No one knows. I forgot all that shit.
They literally just said she got pregnant and then she got married. It's not that complicated. Although I will say not
There's
down.
a prequel movie about her.
Isn't she from the Czech Republic?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it'd be across or up, across and up or something. Bring me honest about geography for a second.
Yeah, pull up the map.
You're asking me about geography.
I have a basic understanding of where the Czech Republic is in relation to Ireland, so I feel like pretty confident.
The east, I'm gonna say.
East. Czech is Eastern
Europe.
Right?
It's down and to the right. It's down and to the right. Yes.
It's down the
down and to the right.
Down and to the right. Take Ireland, go down.
Someone walks towards Lucas. I'm looking for Czech Republic. Can you tell me where to go? It's down to the right.
Well, if you come to Massachusetts trying to find out where the Czech Republic is, you're very, very, very lost. So let us start this film with. We can talk about Glenn Hansard, but let's talk about John Carney for a second. Because John Carney directed this film. John Carney also has directed. This is kind of the John Carney genre in some ways. These Irish music movies.
Music underdogs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Performing and doing music together.
Yeah, this whole month could have been John Carney if he just made one more movie.
It really could have been. I have seen 2 John Carney films. This one and Sing Street. I think. Zack, have you seen more of John? Are you more of a John? I feel like you're more of a John.
I've seen all 3. There's only 3 movies.
But why don't you talk about John Carney? Yeah, tell us about your relationship to John Carney.
Yeah, so John Carney ended up moving to TV for doing that like romance anthology that I can't remember the name of. But I did really want him to become this music movie or tour. I wanted to stay in that ground. So after once he was able to get his kind of bigger studio chance with Begin Again, and it is exactly what you imagine. It's once, but with studio money and polished and a little poppier and a little more formulaic in a lot of ways. And I find it highly watchable and enjoyable, but you can't get out of your mind that just seems like a watered down version of Once. In some ways, which is weird because there's more plot, so it's absolutely watered down, but watered down in its, I don't know, feel and tone. In a way. And I think Sing Street was him really finding that balance. So he was just finding the groove of where he can make the style of music movies he wanted to while getting a little more accessible and a bigger audience. Once had a big audience because of the acclaim, but not really with that intention. So I find him really interesting filmmaker. I think he's really good at that, just that blue collar Dublin music style that I just like am a sucker for, and I hope he stays within that realm. I do question some of his music tastes a little bit. I feel like Glenn Hansard brought a lot to this movie musically, and I think it gets a little more popified and Begin Again. And I know people love music in Sing Street, but it's definitely following much more of a mainstream teenager vibe. And I mean it's doing a lot with like 80s music. Sing Street's interesting because like every song you can relate to a different 80s band. And that's interesting. It's just not my vibe as far as musically.
Jake, how do you feel about John Carney?
I've only seen 2. I haven't seen Sing Street. I saw Begin Again. I did a double. I did a John Carney double feature. I think it was for Your List Sucks episode back in last year. Just because I'd never seen both of them, and it's interesting watching both of them. And like, yeah, Zach said it. Like, Begin Again is definitely like it's like Once is a trial run
movie stars
for Begin Again, but Once is like a definitive version. It's like he kind of already perfected his idea with what he was trying to do, and he likes doing music. I mean, he was in a band, I believe, like before he did Once and all that sort of stuff. I like Begin Again. I think it's like a really just charming kind of New York centered like musician kind of movie. I kind of wanted to. I want to see Sing Street just to kind of see like as far as what else he does. I mean, what he did after Begin Again, and kind of how he evolves as a filmmaker, because I know he's definitely like, as far as like music goes, he's like perfect with what he knows, what he's doing. But as a filmmaker, he definitely clearly gets like better with each film. So I'd be curious to see what he does with Sing Street if I ever get to watching that. But yeah, I do like his style, and I do like what he does with Once, which I will of course get into. But I think he's a solid filmmaker.
Yeah, I would agree. So it's interesting. We all fall into a different basket. I've seen Once in Sing Street, and yeah, I think Zach is right. You can see the money being put into his movies. Sing Street is a little rough around the edges at times. The picture is a little bit grainy. There's a little bit, like, you can tell in some ways that he made this on a very low budget. That he was this was him starting out, and then Sing Street is kind of a more polished version, although different because obviously you're dealing with kids instead of adults. But even though the general, like, the band is the rocket ship that allows them to go on to what they want in the future. It's not like the end of the road, which is interesting. We keep touching on this in these movies, like The Commitments as well, where it's like the band isn't the end of the road. Like, you don't make the band and the band becomes a success. The band is the thing that sends you to the success after. I think Carney is just it's kind of really nice having directors like him who are just like, I'm going to go out and make these small Irish music movies, and that's just kind of going to be my thing, and it's kind of just really enjoyable to watch John Carney just continue to do this. I mean, I'm sure at some point, if he really wanted to, he would have gotten an offer to do something more mainstream, something bigger, but he clearly keeps, like, he likes what he's doing, so he's not trying to just be what a lot of people are, which is that you do the 2 indie movies and then you jump to the big blockbuster, and he's not following that path. We've seen a lot recently.
I would love him to pair. I would love him to pair up with another musician, like he did with Glenn Hansard. I think the collaboration is part of what makes this movie so special, and I think stand out to be compared to the other movies, where it's more in his control. I think he's just really good at bringing a specific musician's perspective to the screen that I want to see again. Who? I don't know. God damn it! Don't be Ed Sheeran. I can see that happening, and that would be amazing.
I mean, he was in yesterday, so he's already going to be in like.
Oh yeah, he's our finest actor.
I think Carney gets less and less creative the bigger his budget is. Begin Again is really nice and like a solid film, but the more money he has, it feels like he just isn't his vision, or at least him as a director, as a creator, his creativity isn't as like fresh and as big as it could be on Once. When you have such a small budget, you really have to work your way through what you want to spend. And the budget on Once is like it's so small. It's 150,000. It's 150,000 pounds. I don't know if that translates I don't know if that's the currency exactly with US, but it's a small budget. Like, it's under $1 million, and the fact that the film doesn't really care for what the budget is, like, it's just all you need is a good story. Like, it just really goes down to what you really need for a good film, and that's like a good story and good characters. And the film doesn't feel cheap at all, which is one of the best things about the movie.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it does feel cheap in a way that I love. Like, it makes it feel more voyeuristic, and it feels natural, like you're just participating in their lives. Almost like it's home videos, and there is shots of home videos, throughout the movie as you flashback in his life. But that's almost what it's like. Yeah.
Oh, so to clarify, it was made for $150,000 or 112,000 pounds. So yes, this is a very, very low budget movie. This is.
Can we compare every movie's box office or budget to pounds from now on, just for our international audience?
Sure. Why not?
Well,
Yeah, no, I think you're right though. It has the effect of it. Look, the entire movie feels like his friend is shooting this on a video camera. There is that personal touch to it where you see his every action in a way that it very much feels close up. We're not shooting him in a way that makes it look, like professional. It looks very much like your friend is shooting your movie. And it also, because of that, it really makes you feel like the camera cares about Hansard as a character and what he's going through. There's like this very personal aspect of like it is very in tune with him emotionally. You can see the camera, the way it follows him, kind of touches on his emotions. Like when he's feeling good, you can see that the camera wants to capture that, and when he's feeling bad, it almost feels like it pulls back a little bit, like it doesn't want to show all that. I feel like it's just a very personal style. And
yeah.
I will say, after
Intimate.
watching Sing Street, it's very different because in Sing Street, you have the same effect, but it is much more like this is a professionally shot movie we're doing with a full crew. Like you can feel that watching it in a way that once feels personal and individual.
I think intimacy is the key word. The way it is shot, it helps you feel like, once again, it almost feels like you are watching something you're not supposed to be. Like if you're on the bus with them and they're on the bus, and he's screaming "fuck" like I do every day. The woman like turns around, and you feel like you're one of the people on the bus, kind of staring for too long, watching him, act a fool, or watching him sing on the street, or you get to be in the studio watching to make it. You always feel like you're witnessing real life happen, and that's what helps it make more intimate, like you're being allowed into this intimate situation, which is key to the themes of the movie, is the intimacy that is forged through a creative or musical partnership. Okay, they're relating that kind of relationship to something romantic or sexual, that it could be just as intimate and close and important.
You want me to make a very weird and very crazy comparison?
Yes, please.
It reminds me of the movie Son of Soul. In the film.
Okay.
Wait, our favorite inside joke, Son of Soul.
No, I know what you're talking about though.
The whole way that film is just, it doesn't have this grandiose epic look at the Holocaust. It's just focusing on this one person. You barely see anything outside of just this close up of this guy and throughout him at the concentration camp, and it's just very much following him, kind of similar in the sense of how small scaled Once is. It's not focusing on this gigantic like story. It's just very small and intimate. I think, I mean, what Zack was saying, on the bus, that feels like such an impromptu moment. Just the old lady looking back, seeing like this crazy guy singing the song about his ex-girlfriend, and there's smaller moments, and especially like the opening scene and how it almost feels like Jackass, the level of where all it's like the hidden camera stuff, and everyone's just seeing this guy stealing this like money from this busker, and it's just, yeah, and when he like passes, once he's chasing the guy, he's like, can you just hold this for me a second? It just feels like that's something that they didn't plan, and like they were hoping would just pay off with the film. So there's a lot of moments like that feels really like intimate and like just something you couldn't do if you had like a $40 million budget. And I think that's just how it's done with like Son of Soul, and how it's focusing on such a small story, even if it's like if it's not trying to be grandiose and epic. And I think that's why this movie works really well.
It's an extremely controlled perspective, which I think would be
exactly.
the similarity between Son of Saul.
Also, that you're right though. They do a lot of stuff where it feels like they just had the two actors go into a situation with a camera, and they kind of let the people in the background be in the background. Like that for opening sequence really does feel like he was playing Hansard is playing, the guy steals it, and those are the two actors in the scene, and everybody else around them are just like random people walking down the street watching him chase the guy who stole his money. And you do get this, and even on the bus, that I don't think that woman is an actor. I think she is legitimately. I think his response is he's apologizing to a real old woman for saying the F word on a bus. Like, there's like a real level of like authenticity to it. Like he literally feels like he was on a bus and he's just singing. He gets into it and he says it, and then he instantly goes, "Oh wow, I shouldn't say that in front of her. That's like really rude. I shouldn't say that." So he apologizes to her in a way that's just very it's just very real. It feels like there's almost a documentary aspect to it. How real life it is.
It's almost like a guerrilla film. And I would believe aspects of that, especially of him busking, is probably, I bet you they didn't clear off a set. They didn't have the money to like block off the streets.
No.
So I bet you everyone walking by is real. So there's a little bit of guerrilla, GUER, not GOR. If it was a guerrilla shot film, that'd be super interesting. um,
The cast
but
of Sing.
it has that aspect, almost like a Borat aspect. Glenn Hansard's just out there pranking all our politicians.
No, but it really does. There's definitely the scenes, especially when guy and girl are walking through the crowd. Any of those sequences they meet in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
That is two actors in the middle of a real crowd having a conversation. Because as you can tell, they didn't have this all mic'd up. They don't have like a great mic system beyond like on the individual people. Like they were just the way the audio sounds. You can tell. Oh, they're just having to deal with regular people walking past and going about their everyday life while they shoot the scene.
Yeah, and that first scene is so important in character development and establishing the environment because you kind of see, like, desperate's not the right word, but for lack of a better term, like how desperate Glenn Hansard, is in that position, how much he's just trying to make it work on the street, and it's hard, and people are just coming and fucking with you, and that he also, like, he's part of that environment because then he sympathizes with this heroin addict. He's like, just ask me for money. Like, I understand, like, you're having a hard time. We're all having a hard time, and it really puts you in that blue collar, Dublin street state of mind.
He also wants to see the. No, go ahead.
I'll say we've just become like really like familiar with that area because that's where guy and girl meet, and I think that's also kind of where he finds like the other buskers when later on when he decides to form a band to create his album, and I think it's just really just that whole location. It just feels crazy that they were able to do it without having to get permits, and the way that they film it, and especially when they filmed that at night, when it's with like the second thing where you see him say, I think it's "Say It to Me Now," when it's just the camera just goes close in on his performance there, and they knew exactly when they wanted to film without having to pay for permits, and I think that just really adds to it. Like, on their feet with every single shot and performance, and every scene where they know that like we can be as precise as possible.
I think the "Say It to Me Now" moment, as well, is at least from my observations, a really good sign of the collaboration and work between Glenn Hansard and what's his face, John Carney. That's how he goes by his family. Is because when I seen Glenn Hansard in concert, he opened the first time I saw him. He opened with "Say It to Me Now," and he played it unmiked, unplugged. And I feel like that's just part of his musical persona, is that to bring you into my life, my emotion. He's having a very personal experience every time he's on stage. He has a very emotional face and voice as he sings, like he's laying everything out, and he wants you to come into that, go into his spirits, and I think that's what "Say It to Me Now" does in the movie as well. It also plays it not like almost in an unmiked way, that it's just like very echoey and like you are hearing it on the streets is the way that the sound works there. To really, and he's like alone in that corner, and you're brought into his emotional experience. Like, it's not as much as wanting to be united as much as going into his soul, which is the kind of musicians I relate
Well,
to
the opening scene kind of tells you a lot about him as a character. He's like very much an optimist. He very much wants to see good in the world. He chases this guy down who steals money from him and then proceeds to give him money because he has just this sense of like he wants to help people, even though like he doesn't need to. It's not his job to help that person. He doesn't like. No one would judge him if he didn't help that person. But like that's kind of his character. He's just like a very nice person, and he's very much an optimist and wants to see that everyone is the best, which is why like he picks up random people off the street and is like, hey, I want you in my band. That seems like a ridiculous concept.
I think that scene's also important because otherwise you would see him so much as self-pitying. I think it's really easy to see him being so stuck in his own problems, but starting with that scene, you can see that he is self-pitying, but he also is a little more empathetic and can be outside of himself as well and understand other people's experiences.
He's also in like the same situation as the heroin guy, so you'd totally be like, okay, just to not give the money. He just hates the fact that he had to run all that way just to chase him down, and when it's like he's not making that much money, and he fixes vacuum cleaners, so how much money is he really making there? So I think the fact that you see him and the fact he gives the money to the heroin addict, it's just whatever that guy's supposed to be. It's just like you really get a sense of that he's a nice person, even though like has no reason to. And I think that really like adds to the character. And it also makes him really relatable in that sense. It's like, oh, this guy's clearly better than me. He just gave money to some guy who tried to rob me. Like I think that really makes it relate. Well, that makes it really like you can definitely like just understand like his struggles and what he's doing. They're both in the same situation, so I think that's really cool.
Yeah, he really just like he wants to help people, and he sees this guy as worse off than him. Like he's not in a great position. Like we may look at him and go, "Wow, you're not making a lot of money. You're maybe not living the dream." But he's like, "Oh, I have more than the guy who's strung out on heroin and trying to steal 5 pounds from me." I do think it's really. No, we'll keep going. I think it's. I do want to talk about the central romance of the movie. We'll have Zack when he comes back. Do you think it's a romance, or do you think it's a friendship that has like feelings of love, maybe feelings of romance towards each other, but doesn't ever become a full romance? What's your take on that? The central guy and girl relationship.
That's probably one of the biggest aspects of the movie I really like is that it's not straightforward as far as what their relationship is, because it definitely starts off as friendly, like acquaintances, and then slowly, I mean, then he fucked that up by, hey, you want to stay over the night? And just she's just completely like befuddled and just like, fuck you, I don't want to see you again after that. But then slowly he realizes, I mean, right after she leaves, like, he realizes he fucked up like big time, and so it makes up for that. So it's definitely like that added element of sexual chemistry, but slowly slowly it becomes more of a friendship, and then during like the last 30 minutes, like I think right when they go to the beach and like he takes his dad's motorcycle, it's like you start to really see like more than just a friendship. And it's an unfortunate situation because guy is still in love with his ex-girlfriend, and girl was married and waiting for a husband, and they have a baby. So it's like it's that unfortunate situation of if things had turned out slightly different, we would probably be together, but we kind of have to be committed to where we are right now. So it's definitely that's part that I really like, is that they don't really know what to do.
I think I have a lot more of a like an optimistic perspective of that relationship. That I think it's not more about like, oh, the shucks, they didn't get to be together and they are going to be missing out this relationship they could have had, but it's more of a being very satisfied with the creative partnership and what was able to occur out of it from that, to where that almost it is equivalent to a romantic journey they could have. That was already a satisfying conclusion. Their relationship is what they were able to fulfill, musically and creatively. I think there's a lot of equation to creative partnerships and romance, and it's a form of romance. Being able to be, I was very proud of this term when I wrote it in the notes, but be mutual muses to each other, that bringing out that inspiration to think creatively about yourself, but also they were kind of muses in just a life sort of way too, that they were both able to move on past the pain and the emotions that were holding them back, that they really brought something out of each other that was for the good. So I think the conclusion of their relationship was all for the positive. They brought something special to each other's lives, and that was worth it. It's not about what they're missing out on, but what they gained from their short term together.
I do think it's interesting.
Without the fucking.
It's interesting though, because it does almost ruin it initially. But though we have a really honest, the way he apologizes for it is just brutally honest when he talks about how lonely he is. Like I think it's one of the reasons that he's able to get her friendship back at that point, is that he is so honest and raw in that moment of just being like, I was lonely. I'm really sorry. I screwed up. I know this. I do think the movie ends in a really interesting way where theoretically they both, so that it is a sort of a romantic movie that ends with neither character ending up with the person that in the movie you would consider their main love interest. And you have two characters who basically end up going to people who, as much as we learn in the movie, they don't seem to have a lot of love for. Like her marriage seems sort of not there. There doesn't seem a lot there. That seems like a sort of dead end relationship. And even he talks about, like, he has a lot of longing for his girlfriend or his ex-girlfriend. There doesn't seem like a lot of attraction or interest left. It sort of feels like the the typical after breakup moment where you have a lot of longing for what was, but not necessarily for the person who is there now. Like you want life to go back to when it was good, but at the same time you still sort of have that hatred for what the person is now because of where everything has gone to. So it is interesting to watch a movie where I think the more traditional ending of this movie would be, oh, they go off together to like do the Sing Street, do the other, sort of a more of a Sing Street or other movies where like you have them disappear off into happiness to go to London to be musicians together. And I think the ending here is more complex and less obvious, and in some ways better for it.
I think more about gain over your pain and your anger and animosity towards someone, because that perspective that you were gaining of them, not viewing their romantic partners in such a positive light. Why would they want to go back? I think that's just because they were in a moment of hate and anger. That's not really a realistic view of how they would feel about them in the best, but their partnership together encourage each other to, try to fight for it, to bring it back to where it was. And, all signs that they have in the movie is that it's on the roads to making it work, as far as she's willing to meet up with them in London. And he actually moves to Ireland, which was like the big issue with her. So it's once they were able to get past that animosity, things were able to go on a brighter road.
I do think a part of it is because even early on when Girl first meets Guy and she's like hearing him perform, and it's when it is say it to me now, and like she clearly realizes that this song was written from something that had happened to him, from like a girl that was romantically into him, and that whole relationship, like it feels like Guy is still longing for her, even though, because I think she was the one who broke up with him, and he's like still like he's still longing for her. And when he's watching like the home videos, you clearly see that there was like something there that he misses, like as back to what Lisa was saying about just being lonely. And I think what I find interesting about that relationship between Guy and Girl is that Girl is the one that's like, is the one that's telling him you should move to London and you should go back with her. And I think that's also a part of that goes back into that, won't they kind of relationship, that romantic relationship that could that evolves later throughout the movie. And I think that's also a part of it that I think is interesting, is that they kind of see themselves as friends, but secretly I think they kind of want more. And of course, with the ending and everything, it couldn't have worked out.
Yeah. Once again, I don't think that they want more as much as like human flaw is the animalistic instincts they knew would drive them to like succumb to sexual tensions, but not necessarily. I think the thing is they knew that was not what was best for life. They both weren't like in the right, state of mind and circumstances to, start a healthy relationship. So they were avoiding that for a reason. It's not really what they wanted. It's just, where they know it may go sometimes. It's we're all humans, guys.
I think they want to be together. I just think she, in particular, is thinking beyond her personal wants and needs in that moment, and realizing that doing that would be really stupid and really bad. As somebody who is married and who has somebody who, and with somebody who is clearly still has got weird issues with his ex. I do think they want to be together. I do think that is interesting. One of the movies where like they genuinely do choose not to be together because of other factors and because of how much of a problem the relationship would end up being.
She's the one that says, "I love you." I mean, there's that powerful moment when they're on the beach and Girl is teaching a bit of a check to Guy, and then he asks, "Do you still love your husband?" I think, and then she says something that Guy has no idea what she says, and I think in at least the translation, she says, "I love you." So if you're watching the movie for the first time, you've got no idea what she said. So that's also an element that's like, I love you, but this is never going to work. And I also don't want you to know, because that could create a bigger mess of later down the track of their own family. Both their lives kind of messing around or being screwed over by just this relationship.
Well, Girl knows she can't run off to London with him. She has a kid. He is at a point of his life where he is free to just jump on a whim and try to go pursue this career, which is what she may want to do in that moment, but she is at least. I mean, she like there's several moments throughout the movie where she continually points out to him that she just can't do whatever she wants. Like he's just like, why don't we go get coffee? She's like, no, I have to go home, because it's just really clear throughout the movie he is free to do whatever he wants at all times. She has this responsibility, her kid, that she can't just stay out all night or go driving or go play in a band or go to London. Like she is much more tied down than he is. And I think that's kind of a cool contrast between the two of them. Is like he gets to act on what he wants and she gets to see what she wants and then have to stop herself knowing that she has responsibilities and can't just run off and do it.
I do think that the scene we were talking about earlier where he comes on to her and she puts him down, I think that sets the terms for their relationship right there. I think at that moment...
Can we call it even coming on to her? It is so blunt. And non-subtle.
Not everybody can be Dr. Smooth like you, Lucas.
I'm not pretending I'm Dr. Smooth. I'm just saying I don't go out and literally say, hey, you want to have sex with me right now.
Well, he doesn't say that. He doesn't.
He didn't say that either. He said you want to stay over.
That, but he didn't say it.
Yeah, he's smooth in that state.
Be classy, gentlemen. Be classy.
Anyways, I think that sets the terms relationship right there to where I think at that point on, at least me, like 8 times watch it, is no longer concerned about it being any kind of sexual romantic love. And I think at least Marquetta or Globa's character, she says, I love you, I think she's understanding of what that love means. That love can have various means. It doesn't have to be a sexual love, and it can be sexual in a different way. I think she loves what they're able to be together in that specific musical creative and still emotional way. There's an emotional love for sure, and how they're able to see themselves in each other and bring out the vulnerability in each other as well. But I don't think because she has that merging of reality with this relationship, that she never really gives it a chance to be anything sexual or even thinks it will be. I think she's appreciative of what it is. Because I think right then it's like he's only acting out of desperation. She has to act out of, where her life is. That's not a real sexual relationship meant to happen.
I think she wants to, though. Like, I think they want to sleep together.
Because everyone wants to fuck, Lucas. Yes. Everyone wants to fuck each other. So
they literally say if they go. I mean,
yeah. Hey, if you go back with anyone, you would probably fuck them.
Wow.
For you right now, you're in a sad life. That's what I'm just saying. It's not that big of a statement. They just know that like they've had such an intimate relationship. They're just bound to go together. That's just how humans act. I don't think that means that they're like think they're gonna fall in love. They know they're not going to fall in love. That's why they don't go for it. It's not the point. I think you're confusing sexual interactions with, romantic love.
Except I think they do romantically love each other. I just think that
in a different.
I think they romantically love each other and are making a conscious choice not to fully act on it. I think if they were unencumbered, they would be together. I think that what the movie tells us is the reason they're not together is because other factors, not their personal feelings and wants, are keeping them apart.
I guess I'd just say much more of a hopeful, optimistic, romantic mindset in general as I view movies, because I think that perspective is a little more, not cynical, but a little more tragic and heartbreaking. It's like what could have became. Maybe that's the point, but that's not how I interpret it, and how I respond to it so deeply is I think it was hopeful about what they were able to be. I feel like they had a whole relationship together, and it was magical, and it created this great music, and it made them move on with their life, and that was important. It's not about the sadness of what they missed out on, and that reality got in their way. I think all great loves don't have to be a lifelong thing. This was a great momentary love, and what was able to happen. They never needed to consecrate it with lovemaking.
Me and Lucas are pessimistic over love, so that's how we see it. Fuck the optimism, I tell you.
I think the movie touches on both. I think the movie wants to touch on the attraction of the moment, and I think at the end of the movie, I think the end is supposed to be a bit of both. I think it's supposed to talk. I think it's supposed to comment on what has been, what they have been to each other, and how important and powerful that was. But also, I think the movie does not end on a happy note. I think there is a hint of melancholy in there of you're leaving somebody behind that you really cared about. And I think that the movie cannot end on like positive because I think they're clearly walking away from something that maybe they never got to fully explore and something that clearly mattered to them.
I view it as moving forward because they were both stuck in a rut with where they were in their lives and their relationships. And this was after everything they were able to do to each other, bring out of each other, they were able to move forward with their lives and go back to, their real lives in a way. They had this little dream scenario in the middle where there are these musicians and now they have to go back to real life, but in a positive light that they can get out of their rut. They were both like in stuck positions. And so they gave each other a hand and pulled each other out of it. And that's the power of that relationship.
Yeah.
They're both. You can't argue that they're not in a better place at the end of this movie than they were at the beginning.
Oh, here's the thing. I can make that argument because I don't think either relationship they're going into at the end of the film ends well. I don't think either relationship there ends positively. I think he goes. I think he sees his ex-girlfriend.
Sequel second.
I don't think.
Great
I don't. That was awful.
I guess it would be twice. I fucked that all up. It'd be
twice. Yeah.
Okay. Damn it.
The intent was there.
Yeah, I appreciate it. No, but I do genuinely think he goes. He sees his ex-girlfriend. He tries to make that work, and I think that relationship fails. I think her husband and her don't work out because I think that they've showed you throughout the movie there wasn't a lot there. They got married because she got pregnant. They didn't get married because they particularly like even the scene at the end of the movie. He's no different from the people who come from next door to watch TV. He's not given any different like place in her life. He's just another random Czech guy who happens to be there. There's nothing special about him. There's nothing special about their relationship. Like I don't think any
too much of that. I mean, he's not in the country, so it's definitely like hard on that aspect.
Yeah,
and she has to basically do a lot of the work. But I think part of it is that we don't see the relationship, and that's part of the movie is that you don't see anything, how much of the relationship it really is, especially compared to what girl has with guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had something to say and I completely lost it. Well, I wanted to talk about because I think what is really like them having a baby or them like consecrating their relationship in a creative way, their creative baby is the studio. I think that's the fulfillment of their mutual muse relationship is them in the studio because you see how magically it all comes together. They go in, they have no idea what anything is about. They talk about miking up, the drum sets, and all the musicians like, "What are you talking about? Like, it's all ready to play." And this guy's like, "These guys are fools. They don't know what they're doing." He doesn't take it seriously. But once they start playing, when your mind's made up, that is that chemistry that he has with Mercury Glover, that romantic, creative chemistry coming to its fruition. It comes to this, great melodying of a song that impresses and brings everybody else, into that relationship, and how powerful that is. So I think that's the powerful fulfillment of, what they were able to do together. That's what that scene represents. Is the recording scene's great, the whole studio thing.
Oh, it's great. Do you want me to get into music now?
We'll do that. We can do that in a sec. I do want to say one thing about the scene, which is I love the guy running the board is just such a dick to them at the beginning. Like he does not care. He's like
fired. The guy's reading that.
He's genuinely bad at his job. He's like really bad at his job. But they do kind of win him over, which is I think a very cute and uplifting scene to be like even this kind of very cynical like, oh, I'm in here recording another demo for a bunch of idiots who think they're a band again. He clearly has that like, oh my god, it's a bunch more people who think they're talented when I know they're not, and it's kind of it's fun to watch him get won over and like to enjoy the music.
The scene where they're playing frisbee on the beach with the guy, I think it's just so like.
Oh, let's talk about that for a second. These people are awful at throwing a frisbee. Like it's like A+ for being awful at throwing frisbee.
They are street musicians.
They're so bad at it. They're so bad at it. They're so bad. They're like.
You expected the Street Thin Lizzy cover band to be great at throwing a frisbee?
It's not hard to throw a frisbee. Just saying.
They gotta learn how to play instruments first, then frisbee.
Yeah.
Okay.
John Carney. I want my ultimate frisbee movie.
But I think the second main theme, other than I said the creative romance, is also just the creative process. I think when your mind's made up, especially falling slowly, I think is just a very important scene as far as
That
the
thing is
creative
very good.
process is, because it's they go to the back of a music store. She wants him to show one of his songs and play one, and her try to play along, and they go through kind of how that song builds together and works together, and how he's trying to explain to her what she should do. And they do use some technical terms as far as explaining when to join at different times, or what chord changes you need to make at different things. It's just it really shows really quickly, maybe too quickly, how a song comes together through collaboration and multiple people. And I find it really magical in that way, because it is that creative spark, but also that romantic spark kind of merging together to create this great piece of music together.
Oh wait, Lucas is muted. I'll just say, yeah, I do like that
Thank
scene
God.
specifically just because it just because the way Guy is like telling girl how the song's gonna play, and then in this beat you go into this progression. I'm not like musically trained. I'm not musically literate. I don't know how exactly I would be able to explain like how if I ever wrote a song or how I would want to explain a song to someone. But I do like how she kind of picks up on the song itself when they are performing Falling Slowly, and how she realizes okay and then at the end, and then she just starts playing it. That if I don't know if that's just this movie reality of how it's for the movie itself. Like we're gonna play the song, but it feels like her as a musician, she's able to like learn and play along with the song, kind of like jazz, improv jazz, in that sense of just okay, so this is I'll do this and then work with the song. So I do like that's in how they both work.
And I do
During the
think they
song.
play it just like imperfectly enough that makes it more natural. Like it's not a fully fine-tuned performance. It takes a while to get together. She's just playing like chord notes a while before she like kind of finds the melody and finds her way to play along. Because for a while I was very doubtful of the scene and how like unrealistic it was that they could play this perfectly. But I feel like the more I see it, the more I feel like it makes it work. You're led to believe she's a classically trained musician. Um, I think just like the intention she is giving to him during that scene, how she's taking every word, I think shows the kind of like learner she is, that she can quickly, adapt and figure things out as they go along. And he, I think, explains it the right that it works. But I think it is also supposed to be kind of magical in that way. And I think a realistic version of magical, and how they are just so perfect for each other musically to come together and make that quickly.
It's just very much classically trained pianist. It's you if you've ever been around one, you can tell them almost anything, even the slightest amount of a song, and you can they just start doing it. Like they can pick up on stuff so quickly and so easily in like a way that kind of blows you away. You're just like, hey, can you play this song? And you just kind of like you give them a little bit of it, and they can just pick it up so quickly. I do think the movie really works because you have two people who are actually musicians in it, so you get to have them. You almost just film them trying to work out music the way two real life musicians would do. It's just like, yeah, just try to figure out the song and I'll film it. Like that, there's a lot of those scenes like that.
Approach, really
Yeah, exactly.
plays.
It's just like you two are musicians, try to figure the song out together, and I'm just gonna film it. And that's why it's so real and works really well. You're like, oh yeah, this is kind of like the process of music. Like nobody just picks up a guitar and plays it perfectly. Nobody sits on a piano and plays it perfectly. You have to figure it out. You have to figure out, how to work together and how to make that work. And I think because of the fact they're actual musicians coming into this, I think we've talked about this with the commitments too, where when you have real musicians in movies about music, it lends it's really valuable, because it's really hard to teach people who are not musicians to be like musicians. It's just not easy.
Big difference between this and Begin Again as well. I think it doesn't feel as real to reality, because there are Hollywood actors, acting like musicians rather than. I think it's important to cast real musicians in your.
Well, it's something we're going to talk about a lot. Not only these movies, but also then later on when we talk about a musical, there is something big about casting people who are in musicals, people who can sing in musicals, versus casting famous people in musicals and then trying to make them be able to sing. There's
I
just
can't wait to talk about my takes on actors in Broadway musicals.
Well, what's easier, teaching musicians to act or actors to perform? It's like singing.
I mean, I think many people would say you can fake the music. You can have someone else playing and you just make them look like they're playing. But I think that's easier said than done. I think there's an authenticity that comes. I think just a emotional resonance. I think especially with Glenn Hansard, that he knows how to respond to his own music and respond to how playing emotionally and exhibit. And that's something that's a little different than acting. Performing is different than acting.
Performance is also like really authentic and really plays with like the way that the film is shot and made, and that whole like low budget hidden camera stuff really makes it easy for him to just perform. And same with what's her name? I don't want to say it wrong. Marquita.
Marquetta Globa.
Marquetta. I think also like really plays like and there's a couple things where doesn't work fully with her performance, but a lot of the times both of them just feel so authentic.
I do want to add my nerdy knowledge of Glenn Hansard that so if you notice the guitar, it has like the hole right by the frets. That is his real guitar that I feel like he's just had forever, and he plays with it, still in concerts. So once again, continuing the authenticity, because that also shows the attachment the character and Glenn Hansard has to music. It's bigger than just making music, but it's like part of him. Like this guitar, he almost anthropomorphizes his way. It's part of his soul. He's going to be using the same holy ass guitar, through his whole life and through his movie. And I think that's important to include that guitar in the movie because it brings that to the character. It brings that kind of loyalty to your musical soul. You're mute, bud.
No, I just I think also, I think back to the question of can you teach musicians to act or actors to play instruments? I just think that when you have people who are performers, like musicians, as long as they are performers on stage, that they can understand how to play to an audience, I think I'd much rather take a musician who is a performer and have them be in the movie, and we can figure out the acting stuff and just make it, have them play real people. Like, obviously, don't make them do something really complicated like play, a real life figure or something, but like as long as you can do stuff like this movie or The Commitments where it's just like play a sort of everyday person, I think you can succeed really well with that, especially because you can add in the fact that they have musical talent.
And we're forgetting that Glenn Hansard is a professional actor, great actor from The Commitments when he was 21 years old, and they did another movie 16 years later.
I think it depends on like the time and the project. Like with certain actors, I mean, I think of is Adam Levine in Begin Again. Like he works for that performance. Ed Sheeran in Yesterday, he works for that performance. And then you look on like he's. I mean, I don't like that movie a lot, but it's like okay, whatever. He's not that big of a performance. Like he's playing himself.
No, he's fine.
That's easy enough for Ed Sheeran. But then you look on the other side of like Val Kilmer playing Jim Morrison, like you can't get a musician to do something like that. You need an actual actor, and then someone who's dedicated enough to play someone in a black and biopic sort of situation. So it's definitely like it always depends on like the film and the context of what is needed of the performance and the musician. So yeah, it does work for this film like extremely well.
Yeah, you can't do a music biopic with an actual musician like this. You couldn't put Glenn Hansard and try to do. I mean, the same thing. Like you couldn't just go get a singer and try to do the James Brown biopic. You need the actor to do all the extra stuff, especially when you have a larger than life figure. But in this movie, you have Glenn Hansard playing a sort of average Joe street performer, vacuum repair person. Like he is very much the everyman kind of working class person, and I think that he can play that very convincingly, and it just works for this movie because also, and I think even for Carney's style, I think Carney clearly he's valuing his ability to play guitar and sing over his ability to act in just the way he's constructing his movie. He doesn't ask Hansard to do that much as a character. Like he asked him to do some stuff, but they're not asking him to do a lot of like fancy dialogue or like there's not a lot asked of him as an actor beyond that the skills that he already possesses coming in as a musician.
I think part of the interest and biographical aspect of John Carney through his movies is his understanding and empathy of the struggling aspiring musician. And that's what he's going through with all three movies. He's really getting into the soul of someone just trying to make their, not really their dreams come true as much as just find their creative fulfillment.
Yeah.
for music.
I think we get to final thoughts now.
You want to talk about music? Or
We're gonna do that in a sec.
We're doing that. That's
doing
a
that.
second segment.
We're fancy. We're fancy.
Jake, don't worry. We have plenty to talk about to beat the Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood time record. We're gonna do it.
Take that, Paul. Zach, final thoughts on Once.
Okay, I still had a couple of things I'll talk about. One, it's in my name. I'm Proud Irish Dad. 2007 was the great year of the Proud Dads. And Proud Dad moments like get me like no other. My favorite scene in Once is none of the musical scenes, but after he records it, before he's heading off to London, he's sitting down with his dad, who's just this gruff Irishman, a few words that just like wants to repair his vacuum. And like there's an earlier scene where she asks like, is your son so talented? And he thinks he's talking about him as a vacuum cleaner repairman. He's like, oh yeah, of course, I taught him everything. And she goes, oh, no music. He's like, oh, is he? Like he just kind of showed like no interest in that aspect. He's just more in that blue collar, logic of like you need to have a trait, and aspiring for something different is not realistic. He doesn't have a lot of scenes, but they establish that relationship there. They're still like a loving. They only have each other. His wife is dead at that point. So there's still like a dependability you can kind of see, but also a distance between where they are. And the scene of them sitting together while he's playing his tape they just recorded for him. And there's just like an awkward pause for a second at the end. And he just goes like, that was bloody brilliant, or he doesn't say bloody, but something along those lines. And it's just those like 3 words of like unexpected pride is just gets deep down in my soul, and that's my level right there to get me working. It was everything I feel like Glenn Hansard needed to be able to move on. That was like the one relationship that was not holding him back, but that didn't have the validation that maybe he needed to fully believe in himself. But once he was able to get somebody he cares about so much, his dad on his side, and had to give that word, go find your woman, I'll be fine without you, go make this work. I find it extremely powerful. And I said 2007 is the best year of Proud Dads because Knocked Up also has one of the best Proud Dad scenes. That's very similar with Harold Ramis. And so both those scenes, just watch them. I'm gonna make my own cut of movies that's just gonna be all the Proud Dad scenes.
There Will Be Blood was also 2007, and there's a father-son relationship.
That's the only reason I had a child, was so I could lose him one day and go, I abandoned my child! I abandoned my boy! I did do that in the restaurant once.
They throw you out.
But I also have decided I'm just going to be like really distant from Theo for 30 years so that I could just have this one unexpected proud moment. Like, you didn't know, but I actually love you. Couldn't tell until now.
Well, in case Theo ever goes to therapy, we now have the video you can show your therapist to explain your relationship with your father. Jake, final thoughts on the film Once.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite just music films in general. I know it's kind of wishy-washy on what you want to call music and musical. I think it's pretty clear what the definition of music is.
This is
compared to a musical. This is not a musical. This is a music film.
Oh my god, I did want to talk about this. No, it's a musical because the whole movie relies on the fucking music. There's literally like 70 minutes of music and like 10 minutes of story between, but because the movie relies so much on the musical performance to tell what the characters are going through, everything they emote is through the music. It doesn't matter if the words are telling their story. It still is kind of so. Just because it's not a fucking magical realism of those stepping out doesn't make it not a musical. A musical is judged on a different way than normal movies. If the performance of the songs is so important, you don't judge a fucking drama by the performance of songs because they don't exist. This movie has a whole nother level that you have to compare it on because it's a fucking musical. It's working on a different way. Well, and then you're gonna tolerate this. The songs are so important to this story itself. And there could be subgenres. Just like action, there's buddy cop action, there's fantasy action, there's subgenres. There could be subgenres of musical. There could be dream musicals, and there could be musical realism, which you can call this. This is musical realism.
I think the definition is definitely a little
Coined.
wishy-washy, but I will. What? No, we're not going to decide chance on this.
It's coined. Everyone's gonna call it musical realism from now on. It's the official term.
I will think this is a music film, and I will somewhat respect your opinion that it's a musical. But yeah, I really just this is one of my favorite music films.
Oh,
Cool.
leave Zach. Leave
Um,
Zach.
It was just one of my favorite just soundtracks. I mean, we'll get into the songs. I really want to talk about the songs, but we'll get into it. But it's just a really like charming. Also, just one of my favorite romance movies, and just really charming and sweet and endearing, and just even just as like someone who wants to like create stuff, and it's really like inspiring on that aspect. Like when they eventually start making like the album and the songs, and it's just there. It's endearing just to see them like just have so much fun making it, and then going to the beach. Just there's like a real connection that really creates with that band specifically. So yeah, I just want to mention this one scene that I always just find hilarious and funny is when Guy goes to get the small loan. And then he meets the guy and he plays the song. It's like, this is really good. You can even take it. And the guy's like, here, let me show you something. And like grabs the guitar and then starts playing. Like you can tell he's like a closeted musician, and like this is like the one time he really gets to express himself. I just find that really like charming. Like that's definitely like a movie thing, but it's really just sweet to see something like that. And it's just like, damn, there you go. He got the 2,000 pounds for the studio. So that's I always find that really sweet.
I do think
Yeah.
that character is the closest to me in real life. Every now and then, a kid will talk about their music. Oh, you like music? Bust out my ukulele.
I mean, the bad news of the movie is that I think the character gets fired shortly after this movie when he's unable to get the money back on the loan he just gave to the guy to make the studio. That was a terrible loan. Just so we're clear.
Hey, is that a bad thing? Because he's able to go for his own musical dreams, and then he
Maybe.
becomes Ireland's next great musician, next to Van Morrison and Damien Rice. I don't know. Bono.
No, I mean this is a really sweet movie. It's just a really wonderful pared down sort of romance music film about two characters, very simple characters, and you just get to see them their relationship grow through music. And I think that is it is exactly what it needs to be. It's not trying to be anything crazy. It's not trying to be anything really large and wide-reaching. It is just a really simple but beautiful story of these two people and their love of music. And I think that Once just kind of is perfect at being exactly what it tries to be. But let us continue on to our second section where we're going to talk about specifically the music in these movies. So we're not going to talk about necessarily the movies. We're talking about this band that was created in this movie. What do we think of that band? And I want to know that Zack, why don't you talk to me about the influence of this band that they create? Obviously, Glenn Hansard being in the movie is a big part of that. Does the band have any other influences?
Yeah, so I mean, it is essentially it's Glenn Hansard's music. This is what he was in the band The Frames through the '90s and early to mid aughts, and this is similar to every music thing. I mean, he wrote the songs, and they actually a lot of these songs were in 3 albums at the time of him with The Frames, and then he formed the Swell Season, which was with Marquetta Glover and still some members of The Frames. So it's still very much in his musical persona. I think this might be a shallow comparison because of Ireland, but I always got the vibe that he is very Van Morrison influenced. I have seen him play some Van Morrison covers live as well. I think that's just like, Ireland's mainstay musician. They're like number one, or is him or Bono. And I think the emotional quality in his voice, kind of his like yelpingness and belliness is very similar, especially a lot of the earlier Van Morrison stuff. And sometimes like just an angry way to play the acoustic guitar, it kind of just gets fast because he's so lost his emotion is also very Ireland musician in general. I feel like there's a lot of Irish musicians, Damon Rice as well, who actually get to thank you at the end of the movie because he probably has a relationship with Glenn Hansard. They're contemporaries, but he has that same kind of quality too. So I think just that that Irish pain comes out in Glenn Hansard's style of music that he still makes to this day. I think he's trying to be a little more not experimental, but trying to change it up a little bit. There's some avant-garde qualities, not avant-garde music at all, but trying to be a little different. He's a little less belty and shouting and a little more jazzier in some ways as well. So trying to change it up, but listen to them all the time, please. All the time.
Absolutely. And I think this is actually a really good band, although we don't necessarily see as much from this band as we do in some other movies. We don't really get to see them necessarily perform like we would in something like The Commitments. But I think, really
So
successful band.
you get When Your Mind's Made Up.
Yeah.
You did a couple of songs during that whole studio thing.
Yeah.
Other than that, like I don't know, it's not because like the film's not really a band movie in the sense like compared to like other movies, but there is like a really you get a creative
They're a duo,
I guess,
really.
yeah. I mean, it's specifically it's Glenn and Makeda, but when they do like perform, they definitely do have that sense of like a connection that like creatively speaking when they start making the songs, which I think is really cool.
But yeah, musically, it's a lot more in the singer-songwriter sort of things. It does sound like it's coming from one person's voice and one person's perspective, and everyone is there to help just bring out that voice. But I think that's emblematic of what the movie's trying to do. Margareta Glow is there to bring out the highest quality of what Glenn Hansard's musical persona is.
Absolutely. I know you two. I know Jake wanted to do top 5 Glenn Hansard songs. I will bow out.
Specifically, one songs.
How about one song?
I'm only familiar with Glenn Hansard.
I will drop out the top 30 Glenn Hansard songs.
All right. Not doing that because we're not recording a 4-hour episode with
bonus episode. Zack ranks music.
Bonus episode, Zack solo podcast. Okay,
that's why I
am out of this because I did not prepare, but I will let you two go and moderate. Zack, you're the host. Why don't you go first? Give us your 5.
Okay, well, I didn't make a formal list, so I'm going to be making it up as I go.
All right, Jake.
I'm going to.
Yeah. Number 5. When Your Mind's Made Up. That's really like enduring, kind of. It's very like just powerful, like kind of just. Especially, I mean, I'm also calling a bit of the context with the scene and how it like goes with the movie, but yeah, it's very just like endearing and inspiring and kind of. I'm just glad it's that song. That is the first one that they perform as a band and they record, just because it feels like that's the song that really kind of like sets the tone and for the rest of that scene. I think it's just a really really like easy to listen to song. It's just very like powerful.
All right, what's your number 4?
He's still figuring it out. Number 4 is the titular song "Once." It's not in the movie. It's only during the credits. I think it's maybe one of the more underrated songs. But it's very somber, very like small scale, and just not as It's just very like minimal compared to a lot of the other songs on the album. And I think it's very like sweet. Just very sweet song. I think it's just beautiful, and it's just the credits are so short in the movie. It's only like 2-3 minutes, so you only hear like a minute of the song, but it's on the album it's just it's really really nice.
All right, what's your number 3?
Number 3 is I wish it was in the full version was in the movie, but I'm trying to pull myself away. I think that's just I really like the vocal performance by Glenn Hansard in that song, just because he's very he's giving it a go. I think that's why he works really well as a lyricist and as a performer, is that he really knows like to bring the best out of his vocal performance, and I think that's his. Is he playing this?
All right.
I lost my train of thought, but I think it's the best vocal performance by Glenn Hansard. Is trying to pull myself away. So,
what's your number 2?
Number 2 is I think one of the best. We're going into the 2 most emotional songs of the movie. "Lies," which plays during when Guy's looking at the home videos of him and his ex-girlfriend. I think that really works. It just that song especially goes kind of the microcosm of their relationship is through the song itself, and I think it's just a really, really, really powerful, like emotional. I won't say breakup song, but you kind of really get the relationship that I had with his ex-girlfriend in Lies. And it's just a really beautiful song.
It feels like a retrospective song, like he's looking back at the relationship, and kind of you get to see the positives, and then you starts to get a little bit sadder, and you get to see like the illusion almost get broken a little bit. What's your one?
I mean, it's Falling Slowly. I think it's hard. I really wanted to pick something that wasn't the most obvious song from Once, but yeah, it's the song that is like the epicenter of the entire movie. It's played like three times throughout the movie. Their first performance with the piano, and then later, I think when they like listening to it again, and then the last scene of the movie. I forgot to mention about in the last scene, because the audio is very much like low budget. It's not as clean or crisp as like if it was like a bigger budget. But in that last scene, it like just slightly. It's so subtle, but it goes up, and it's just like perfect and just plays with like the whole theme of what the movie's trying to say. I think Falling Slowly is just like it's a beautiful, very beautiful song. That performance by both Glenn and McKenna is just really powerful stuff. And I'm just glad that it won the original song. It's a fantastic song.
Wow. I mean, I am very impressed. This is probably the most work we've ever had a guest do, bringing our top 5. Zack, have you created your dueling top 5?
Yeah, and I changed it 4 times while Jake was talking. And I probably should have kept this one off because he already said it. But so my number 5, I have tried to pull myself away. As well, I was confused with another song because at first I was thinking like that's the worst song in the movie, but that's "Falling from the Sky." I was confusing the two because they happen right after each other. Close to the same. Trying to pull myself away is I think it's a good combination of the pain he always has and admits the most through his songs, while also having kind of a fucking attitude. It's somewhat like one of his rockier, or at least pop rockier songs has a more upbeat quality to it. So even though the pain is still in the words, and there is kind of like more fuck it, we're gonna keep moving forward and rolling. It's not quite as dreary as a lot of his other songs can be. So I wanted on the list to represent that more fun quality. Number 4, I have The Hill, which is Marquetta Globa's song she plays on the piano that she found in the background room. That song took me a long time to really get into. And I think the more I watch the movie, especially, I think that scene works because her voice, is not as strong as Glenn Hansard. So some of those songs didn't work for me right away. But I do feel like she's able to, grapple with the same pain and feelings that Glenn Hansard does too in his songs, just in her way. So I think I appreciate that to give the different perspective and a different look at pain, but it's also just like lovely piano throughout it, and the melodies are it's a little darker and moodier in a different way, but it's lovely. Movie the feminine touch. All right, number 3, which is like hurts me to say number 3 because it's a song I really love. But say it to me now. I like the raw quality of Say It To Me Now, and especially the way I've always seen him perform it. I think it's just pure emotion, just pure letting things out. It's almost like a journal entry, sharing its way off the page, in a way. So great song. Number 2, I'm going real wild card here, because it's not a Glenn Hansard song, but it's Gold. This is the song they sing at the party, the Irish party, which is was my college years for a while. But unfortunately, the really musical crowd was 2 years above us. That was we had some mixture of friends, so we see them a lot. They all just play different instruments and pull it out at different times. And I just love that scene. It takes me back to that kind of environment. It's almost like a show and tell. Everyone's taking their time to, play some songs and have these mini collaborations to create stuff together with people that you don't normally play with. And if I imagine, I think it's probably an old. I haven't googled it, look it up, but I would assume it's like an old timey Irish song because it seems like one of those songs that everyone would know or sing in the pub at the bar, and it just has that great kind of historic quality to it, and that and the blue collar quality that I love. My number 1 is not Falling Slowly because I actually don't love that song. It's When Your Mind's Made Up. To me, is a perfect scene. It's a perfect song. I think it's everything Glenn Hansard does best. It combines, some of the pop rocker elements they say he does in pull myself together. There is a very forward momentum to how that song goes, to where it really leads off to the very grand emotional ending, which is no one does better than Glenn Hansard. As far as just laying it all out for the last 30 seconds, it's all just a rise. The song goes on a constant rise to he just kind of explodes with his pain. So that's my number one.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming to our music podcast I've been trying to do forever. Next week, tune in, talk about my top 250 of the 1960s.
So we can give credit where credit is due. Gold is a song by the band Interference, which was formed by Fergus O'Farrell and James O'Leary.
I think is the guy that sings it in the movie.
I believe he is credited in it, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the band is the people who sing it in the movie, yes.
Yeah, well, Glenn Hansard's playing more rhythm too in the movie, at least.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate both of you for coming up with those lists. Those are fantastic. Do you guys have any more final thoughts about the music in this? The band that they create doesn't really have a name, which is kind of weird that they have a band that has no name.
Swell Season. That was their band that came out of this. They performed a Swell Season. There's a great music documentary or concert doc about their tour after the film, because they were a real life couple for a while and they toured together. They eventually broke up.
Including
documentary I highly recommend.
Shocking.
Also, I saw them in 2007 when Once came out in Chicago with Obama. He was. They announced him there. This was like before he was full on a candidate, because he would have been in 2008, in early 2008. So I don't know if he announced at that point, but he was definitely like an up and comer, Chicago senator. So him and Michelle were watching. I didn't see him, but Glenn Hansard said something about them being there. He must have been like in the know for them to announce it. He must have been running at that point. But
Obama's, I believe, got his fame in the 2006 DNC, where he had a particularly impressive speech. And then, yes, he probably was a candidate, or at least rumored as one by that point. But
because it would have been end of 2007.
He was the senator from the state of Illinois. He was not exactly he was not really a small premise, although he became.
But for Glenn Hansard to shout out, like, why would Glenn Hansard care about senator of Illinois?
I don't know.
So but it was the end of 2007. So yeah, something had been said.
Yeah.
No. I think of anything else. We kind of really gone through like almost everything as far as what we could talk about with Once. I'm just happy that a film like this exists. I kind of like these romance movies more than just ones where they. I do like certain ones where they get together, but something about just there's more of an emotional resonance and connection that I get with ones where it's more ambiguous as far as if they do end up together, and I think that just adds more to the movie. Like, it makes me think about it more than I would if they do get together. And there's certain examples of that I do really like, but something about Once is just one that it lingers with me after I've seen it.
I find it also just highly watchable. It's one of those ones, like The Commandments, I can feel like I can turn on every day, and I think the music is a big part of that. And I do want one clarifying thing for those who aren't as known about my memory and my memory abilities. If Obama comes out like after this episode says I have never been to a Swell Season concert, that makes sense. There's a 40% chance I'm making all this shit up and I'm wrong in altering memories. But in my memory this happened, but who the fuck knows? I've been hit in the head a lot. I tried to juggle baseball bats once. I ran into a house. That's right. Zack's top 5 head injuries.
We can compare my head injuries. All right, we'll have fun.
I feel like Lucas is done with the show.
Zack's talking about head injuries. I think that's it's my sign to say thank you for watching this. Yes, I would agree this is very watchable. And I agree with Jake. I think it is. There are so many romantic movies where the end of the movie is the couple realizing that whatever was in their way is the thing in their way and getting past it and then being together. So it is refreshing, and I think very it's very impressive when they do the movie where it is they don't end up together, but they don't end up together for like the right reasons. Like sometimes in movies, like when the thing is infuriating is if you use a couple that should be together and like something really stupid or really small stops them from being together. And this movie, it makes sense where they don't end up together, and you're not mad at the movie for them not ending up together because it makes sense. You're like, okay, I get it. I get the place they are in their lives and then why they wouldn't be a couple at this moment. But yes, Thank you to Jake for appearing on this episode. He was fantastic. We'll definitely have him back at a later date when we find another movie that he is as passionate. We do the second Once podcast. But yes, so thank you to Jake. Thank you to Zach. Next week, we come back with week 3 of Making a Band movies when we will discuss School of Rock. So we are leaving Ireland. We will not be coming back to Ireland for the rest of this month. Zach is very sad about that. The Ireland run is over. We started the month in Ireland, and now we have to branch out and go to the United States for the rest of it. Because we're not very creative. There are only 2 countries in the world that make bands, and they're Ireland and the United States.
I tried to put Sweden on the map, and that got cut down. Maybe Sweden, I think, or Denmark. I don't know.
I don't remember what you said. All right, we're done.
Yeah.
This is the longest episode we've ever done. Congrats, Jake Maringoni. You're the longest guest ever.
Longer than the movie once.
You
Longer
need
than
to end the
movie
show by
once.
saying "fuck you, Paul Yama," and then we'll
Fuck
sign
you,
off.
Polyama. I'm better, obviously.
And Mr. Rogers.
This is definitely longer than once. We have now recorded longer than once. We have become our podcast. We have become our podcasting idols in making podcasts longer than movies that we talk about. With that said, thank you to you too. Thank you to everybody who listened. I don't think anyone listened to 95 minutes of this, but if you're still here, we love you. You're the best fans. And by that,
Thank you,
best
Michael
fan,
Campbell.
we mean Michael Campbell is still here. But yes, we will see you next week when we talk School of Rock. Goodbye, and go watch another movie.